Hey friends, welcome back to the Firstieland Podcast. I'm your host, Molly Schwab, and today we're diving into one of the building blocks of language skills, which is grammar. Now, I honestly can't think of a single kid that's ever said, I just loved learning about grammar in school. But nevertheless, it has to be taught, because without it, kids wouldn't have the tools that they need to comprehend in reading or write clear and interesting sentences. So in this episode, we're starting with the basics, and we're talking all about nouns, what they are, how to teach them in a fun and simple way, and why they're the perfect place to begin your grammar instruction. So let's get started. Hey there, I'm Molly from Firstieland, a former elementary teacher with over 30 years of experience in kindergarten and first grade. I'm here to help make teaching a little easier and a lot more fun. Whether you're looking for the perfect read aloud, fresh writing ideas, or simple classroom tips, I've got quick, practical strategies you can use right away. New teacher or experienced educator, there's something for everyone in Firstieland. So grab your coffee and teacher bag. Let's get started. I realize that nobody ever said that learning grammar was going to be super fun, but if you know me, I've got to find a way to get kids interested in whatever we're learning, and that includes grammar. So today, we're going to break it down into the very first grammar lesson you should teach, which is all about nouns. So what are nouns and why do kids need to know about them in kindergarten and first grade? Nouns are words that represent people, places, animals, and things. And the reason kids need to know about nouns is because they're the foundation for language and communication. Oftentimes, nouns are the first words that kids learn. Think about it. What are the first words that kids say? Doggy, water, book. These words are all nouns. And at a very young age, kids learn to name objects and people, and that's how they learn to communicate. And as kids get older and they begin school, this knowledge of nouns expands into helping them with reading comprehension and writing. When they can identify the noun in a sentence, it can help them tell the subject of the sentence and help them better comprehend what they're reading. And in writing, understanding nouns is going to help kids write better, more interesting, and complex sentences. So where do you begin when you're teaching kids about nouns? I like to use picture books as often as possible, and there are some great books that you can use for teaching kids about nouns. The first one is called If You Were a Noun by Michael Dahl, and it shows kids the difference between common and proper nouns in a kid-friendly way. And then another good book is called A Mink, a Fink, a Skating Rink by Brian Cleary. It's another book that gives lots of examples of nouns, and it's written in rhyme, so kids like it. Whenever I was teaching my class about nouns, I had a very simple anchor chart that I used to introduce them to kids, and at the top of it, it said, what is a noun? And then below that, there were 4 boxes. The first box said, a noun is a person. The second box said, a noun is a place. The third one said, a noun is an animal. And the last box said, a noun is a thing. And then inside of each box, there were pictures of people, places, animals, and things. And so when you're teaching kids about nouns, you can have something like this and then name some of the different types of nouns. Like, for instance, mom, dad, boy, firefighter. Those are all people, and those words are nouns. So you can show that to kids on your anchor chart. And the same thing for animals. Have some different animal pictures on your chart, like a dog or a monkey or a bird, and talk about how those are all animals and the words for them are nouns. We would usually label the pictures on our chart in interactive writing, and I'd call on different kids to come up and help me write the different nouns, and we'd talk about how each of these words that we were writing were nouns. And so we'd have this basic chart that showed the definition of a noun, but then we'd also break it down and make a chart for each type of noun. We'd spend a whole day learning about nouns for people, and then another day learning about nouns for places, and then another day learning about nouns for animals, and finally a day for learning about nouns for places. So we'd spend at least a week learning about different types of nouns. We'd make an anchor chart for each type of noun, person, place, animal, and thing, And we'd make a new one each day, and I'd have a bunch of pictures on the chart that represented that type of noun, and I'd call on different kids to help me label the pictures. So, for instance, on the nouns for animals chart, I might have a dog, a bear, a snake, a fish, and then we'd label them and talk about how the words that name those animals are nouns. So after we made all these charts, we'd hang them up in our classroom and we'd keep them up all year, and kids could refer to them to help them in their writing all year long. Another fun way to teach kids about nouns is to play some games. One of the games we played was very simple. I had some large, oversized dice that I bought at Dollar Tree, and I wrote the 4 types of nouns on each side: person, place, animal, and thing. And then on the last 2 sides, I wrote roll again and lose a turn. And so the kids would play the game in small groups at their table, and all they did was roll the die, and they had to name something in the category that they landed on. So if they landed on people, they had to say a noun for people, like boy or doctor or whatever. It was very simple and good practice for learning about different types of nouns. Another fun game we played was Nouns Scavenger Hunt. For this game, the kids had a little sheet of paper that was divided up into 12 squares with the words person, animal, or thing in each square, and they had to walk around the room and find different nouns that would fit in each box and write it down. They love that because anytime you can get up and moving around, they enjoy it more. And plus, did you know that when kids are moving like that, they're more likely to remember the skill because they associate the movement that they're doing with the skill. So getting kids up and moving in their learning is always a good thing. We also played I Spy, where kids had to describe something in the room, and then we had to guess what it was and what kind of noun it was. That was always fun. And then finally, I made a little board game called Name That Noun, where the kids had to roll a die and move around the game board, and each space had either the word person, place, animal, or thing, and the kids had to name a noun from that category when they landed on the space. It was easy, but anytime you can make learning into a game, kids just love it so much more, and they remember the skills better too. You can also do sorting activities when you're teaching kids about noun. I loved any time I could use the pocket chart, and so I made some simple headers that said person, place, animal, thing, and then there were picture cards with words on them, and the kids would sort them under the correct type of noun. And then as we began to learn about common and proper nouns, we had a pocket chart sorting game for that too. And after we did them all together at our group lessons, then I put the games at our word work center for the kids to practice on their own. We also used different worksheets for practice and assessment, and I found some great videos on YouTube that helped kids learn more about nouns too. So once the kids have a good understanding of what nouns are, then you can begin to extend that into other subjects. For instance, when they're reading in small group, you can ask kids to find words that are nouns on the page. And when kids are writing, you can ask them to include different types of nouns in their sentences. For instance, you might ask them to write about an animal that they'd like as a pet, and then encourage them to use your nouns for animals chart that you made and include one of those nouns in their sentence. So there you have it. Some fun, easy ways to introduce nouns to your class and make grammar feel a little less boring and a whole lot more engaging for kids. Everything I talked about in today's episode, including the books, games, and activities, can all be found in the show notes. And if you want to save yourself some time, I have a complete nouns unit in my TPT store that includes all of these activities ready to go. All right, friends, thanks for listening. And until next time, remember to make learning feel like play. See you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you're walking away with some great tips that you can use right away. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love it if you'd leave a review. You can find the show notes and links for everything mentioned in this episode at Firstieland.com. I'll see you next week in Firstieland.